It's time to dream the night away. What's up YouTube? Drew here. Today, welcome to my conversation about Disney Starlight, the new nighttime parade that has just debuted at Walt Disney World's Magic Kingdom. I want to offer everything I love about this parade, which I truly love, and some constructive criticism on what Disney needs to fix immediately in this parade to make it that much better than it already is now. So with that being said, let's get to it. Disney Starlight was announced at D23 last August and has been in development for over 2.5 years to get to now its official debut in the video that you guys are seeing right now. This parade features over 30 Disney and Pixar characters, some of which appearing in a nighttime parade at a Disney park for the first time ever. And if my voice sounds different, that's because I've watched Starlight 6 times already. That's why I'm doing this initial review, because I think I've had some time to actually digest it, and just seeing it 6 times in person definitely helps with the review. My thought process is that you'll never review a movie before seeing it at a movie theater, or you'll never review a movie before watching it on Disney Plus or wherever you watch movies. So a lot of people have been talking about this parade and they haven't seen it in person, which quite honestly drives me insane. Why does anyone think it's acceptable to review a parade that is a 360-degree experience with the kinetic energy, emotion, and atmosphere of what you get by experiencing it in person as it was designed to be experienced? I just don't understand that. So I went, I saw it, I watched it on Main Street, and then I ran over to Frontierland to catch it again. Well, the parade's only performed 3 times at the time of me recording this video. I've seen it 6 times because I'd watch it on Main Street and then run over and watch it again. The parade starts off with the Blue Fairy, which is the entire story for this parade. This constellation and processional of floats is brought to life through the Blue Fairy's magic and through the magic of Starlight, hence the name Disney Starlight. So the Blue Fairy kicks off the parade as she is powering everything that you see after her. Pro tip, if you watch the parade on Main Street, at the very front of the park, right outside of the firehouse, the emporium, and the barbershop, that is the best viewing spot if you want to hear the initial kickoff with the audio, because there is about a 1.5-minute long introduction to the parade before the gates even open and the Blue Fairy starts rolling down Main Street, which I think is pretty cool. It sets up the story and talking about why we are there and the power of wishing upon a star, and then the gates open and the Blue Fairy appears. And I gotta say, this Blue Fairy float is massive in person. I was honestly shocked at the scale of this float and just how the Blue Fairy is talking to us, acknowledging us, and welcoming us to this procession of the floats that you are about to see. I really love this float and the kinetic energy on it, and just the fact that there's an actual performer here bringing the Blue Fairy to life along with that audio addressing the guests. I think it really does bring the parade to life. And what I love, this is something that I didn't know was going to happen. I knew a lot about this parade going into it, so I knew I was going to love it. But I didn't know that Pinocchio and Geppetto were going to appear through her granting Geppetto's wish of bringing Pinocchio to life. Now, the thing about this moment is that it only happens at certain times whenever the parade is reaching the points where that audio plays, if that makes sense. So on some of my viewings, I've seen Pinocchio and Geppetto, and other times I've just seen the Blue Fairy. The best way I can describe it is that they kind of appear through her magic on the back of the float once that wish is granted. And whenever she's talking, you're not going to see them. But once she uses her wand and grants that wish, then you see Pinocchio and Geppetto talking about how he's a real boy now and he has come to life. That was just a really cool moment. And the fact that Disney could have done this through a screen, but they didn't. There's actual performers here. The physical characters are there in person, which I loved. Next up, you have Asha, Valentino, and Star from Wish, the movie that released for Disney's 100th anniversary. I've seen a lot of people say, why is Wish in this parade? Well, like I mentioned earlier, when you have a parade in development for over 2.5 years, those decisions are made long ago. So Disney probably thought that Wish was going to perform better than it did. But I will say, Wish is my favorite Walt Disney Animation Studios movie. So I am one of few who absolutely loves to see Asha in this parade. And while it is a smaller float, I think it works perfectly because in the movie, it's Asha at the wishing tree by herself making wishes, and here it's more of that personal moment, highlighting Asha's moment from the movie, which I think kind of runs deeper in this parade as you are seeing these magical moments from the stories, and there's a very specific moment that is being shared with you, if that makes sense. So I think the scale of this float is perfect for the story that they are telling with Asha specifically. Now, I will say another thing to keep an eye out here for is that Star, the little star himself from the movie. In the movie, there's a really fun moment when they are meeting for the first time, and Star kind of uses a ball of yarn to show that his name is Star. He literally forms a star with the yarn, and in the parade, that moment happens. There is a little digital star, and then he vanishes, and you see him form the star through the yarn. And just seeing that moment from the movie come to life in the float, if you were paying attention for it, it is done very, very well. Moving on to Encanto, this float looks exactly like the concept art that Disney shared at D23, brought to life in almost a one-to-one way. This is the first time we have seen Isabella at Walt Disney World alongside the characters we previously seen, Mirabel and Bruno. And I will say the most interesting thing I think with the float itself is that Bruno is the only one talking here. He's talking about family and the power of family, which obviously we see in the movie. But I would have loved to see Mirabel and Isabella talk here as well. So maybe that was an issue with the voice actors not being able to come back. But Bruno talks here, which I think is cool. And my favorite moment is when the candle kind of comes to life. They acknowledge the candle illuminating and powering the magic within their family. So beautiful float. I love the colors here, but honestly, all of the floats are stunning. Like, I don't really have any notes with any of the floats themselves. But what I will say, and this is going to be a recurring point throughout this video, is that the ground units, which starts off with Encanto, unfortunately, they are very, very weak. And I think that Disney needs to improve these immediately. The concept is fun, like the golden butterflies kind of flying around the float through the magic. But what I will say is that this is a live entertainment parade. So when you have these performers here and they're not performing, it leaves a lot to be desired. What I would have loved to see is with the butterflies, keep the same concept, but have the performers themselves be the butterflies rather than the performers wearing the butterflies, if that makes sense. All they're really doing is walking around. So while I have absolutely no issues with the performers themselves, I want to be very clear about that. The performers are doing their job. I have no problem with any of them. I know a lot of people performing in this parade, and they're all very talented. They're all very passionate, but they aren't able to perform here because of the restriction of, you know, what they're wearing with the butterfly costume. So I'd put the butterfly wings on their backs with new costumes, allow them to be flying through the parade route and bring some more energy to life. My issue lies with the costume itself, not the performers. So, like I said, I'll have more thoughts on some of these ground units as we go. But Encanto float itself is beautiful. I love that we have three of the main characters here. You have the classic Encanto music brought to life in a new way. I just want the performers fixed with them themselves as the butterflies flying through the parade route. Next up, we have Frozen, and again, the same issue that I have with the Frozen unit is that the performers are carrying the Frozen fractals rather than being the Frozen fractals themselves. I think the first thought that I had was, I think the best way I can describe it is if you put the fractals on gloves on the performers and then they came together to form the fractals and then kind of spread apart as Elsa uses her magic. I think that would have been a really, really cool way to connect Elsa to the performers, to where, again, the performers are performing rather than them, you know, just holding the things. It's almost like they're trying to visually show us a story rather than tell a story through the performers themselves, which I think is a big miss with this parade. But with the Frozen float itself, that float is actually really powerful in person because it has Into the Unknown, which honestly I prefer Into the Unknown over Let It Go or any of the other Frozen songs. I think it's more of a powerful song, and in person, Elsa connects with her mom and Anna on the digital ice spires on the float itself, which doesn't translate well to video at all. But yeah, that float is really, really cool in person, and there's some like mist around her and some like air that kind of makes her dress come to life as she's performing. So it's really, really well done, and I really love that Frozen float more than I was expecting, because we didn't have concept art for it or anything. It was kind of just, here it is in person now for the first time ever. So that is kind of the beginning of the parade, the first half, leading into the more classic units we see later on. This leads us into the Disney royalty float with all the Disney princesses and princes. This float, honestly, I don't have any notes. It's absolutely massive. You have two couples on each side with this beautiful waterfall in the center. This float was inspired by Disney legend Mary Blair's artwork with her light, airy tones, especially since she worked on Cinderella and Cinderella is in this parade. The first thing I noticed with this float is that I absolutely love how kind of on the outside of the float, there's like this curvy line where it looks like a shooting star is flying around all of the couples as they are dancing together. So that's just a really, really nice touch, you know, along with the fact that whenever the songs play for the couples, the float reflects that color. So for example, whenever Tale as Old as Time is playing for Belle and the Beast, the float turns yellow. And whenever Princess Tiana and Prince Naveen are dancing, the float turns green with Evangeline playing. So it's really nice how that float comes to life specifically for the couples that are represented. And also the fact that, for example, whenever that couple is dancing, they have the spotlight not only from the colors on the float itself, but the other couples aren't dancing along with them. So if Tiana and Naveen are dancing, they have the spotlight. They are doing the main dance, where the other couples are more relaxed in that moment, really allowing them to shine while their song is playing, if that makes sense. One of those things that I didn't pick up on until last night on like my 5th viewing. So again, it has to be experienced in person, where you can actually see these details after multiple viewings and really appreciate the amount of time that went into programming everything from the choreography to the performers themselves, bringing the story to life, to the lights on the float itself as it's making its way throughout the park. Then we have Coco, and I was expecting to love this float the most going into the parade, and sure enough, they delivered. This float is so visually vibrant, and there's so many things here that have wow moments. Something that I actually didn't notice until my 6th viewing last night. On the last one of the night, the timing happened to be perfectly, where the main magical moment is Pepita takes flight, and Miguel is absolutely shocked at what is happening. He says, "Is this a dream?" And Pepita takes flight, and there's steam coming out of Pepita's nose, and then the fireworks are going off and there's spotlights as if it's celebrating this performance. It is so, so, so pretty. And the concept art that we saw for this float, I think, really highlights that moment where Pepita takes off and Miguel is shocked at what's happening, and the fireworks and the music, the mariachi music. It is such a beautiful, beautiful float in person. And I think something that could make this unit so much better is if they added some trumpeters that kind of announce the sounds of mariachi music through live music in the park. That's something that I was thinking about. Or maybe just adding some skeleton dancers, performers around the float. I think that would be really, really cool. But the float itself is so beautiful, but there's a little bit of a gap there between the Royals float and the waltzers around the Royals float, and then leading to Miguel. So that would be another note I have. Add some skeletons, especially because it's a nighttime parade. So if you had these beautiful lights that make it look like a skeleton come to life, that would be something that I'd love to see in the future for this float. Now, leading to Moana, the scale of this float is just ridiculous. And the Moana float has another wow moment that the first time I watched it, I literally said wow out loud because I didn't know what was happening. And if you were standing next to the float itself, like front row on the parade route, that's the way that you get to experience it, from being at the front row view and just timing based on if you happen to see this moment as the parade's making its way throughout the park. As we know, Grandma Tala and Moana have a very close relationship, so the audio comes from the float itself. Grandma Tala says, "I'll always be with you," and then you see Moana look down, and Grandma Tala jumps out of the water, and it is just a really, really cool moment. And the teams that worked on this parade actually used some new lighting technology to make Grandma Tala come to life and really make it look like she is there, and just the fact that the lighting has to work in this nighttime environment. So the waves, it is an absolutely stunning float. And this Moana float has some performers around it, which the props themselves that kind of represent the waves of the ocean, I have no issues with that, but the performers' costumes themselves, they're just black. Like, there's no lights on these performers' costumes, and what's so sad is they're so passionate about the work that they're doing. Like, in person, they're smiling and they're so happy to be there performing in this parade, but they're held back by the fact that there's no lights on their costumes. Which I can understand, because they're probably trying to get the guest to focus on the waves that they're, flying around. But I feel like you could almost design a float to where it looks like water, and then they're dancing and the choreography itself is brought to life through them, where they are the moment. And knowing how passionate these people are about performing, like I've said multiple times, I think making them their performance rather than showing us the performance would do a lot better. So I don't know, but the Moana float itself is just ridiculous. I absolutely love that float, and just the fact that there's multiple waves and it really does look like it's flowing through the white lights and the green lights and the blue lights. It is absolutely stunning. And also the fact that if you look up at Moana's sail, where you have the logo for Moana, there's stars on that sail that are brought to life through some of the lighting, and that is obviously a nod to this parade being Starlight. So very, very beautiful float. Following Moana, we have Peter Pan and Wendy, and as far as I know, this is the only float that isn't in its final form yet. The Peter Pan float literally just arrived to Walt Disney World, like it barely made the debut. There's been a lot of work going on behind the scenes to get this parade to the finish line, so much work, and that's why Peter Pan and Wendy are not flying yet. At a later date, we don't know when that's going to be happening yet. They will be flying above the streets of London. So right now they are there, they are dancing together, they are performing, but they're not flying yet. So it's still a stunning float. Like, don't get me wrong. There is so much kinetic energy with this float. It really is huge, way bigger than I was expecting. And the lights are gorgeous. Peter Pan and Wendy are awesome. I love the lighting on them, where it really makes them the spotlight as they are kind of looking down at everyone. The story is that, they're on the rooftops of London, so they're like, can they see us? Can everyone down here see us up here? But because they're not flying right now, at points, like the buildings on the float itself blocks them. So once they're flying, this will be a big wow moment, but that has not happened yet. So something to look forward to. And then that takes us to Whimsy, the grand finale float. And there's really no words to describe how beautiful this float is in person. From the train itself, the new original character, like I mentioned, named Whimsy, to the classic characters you see on this float, like Pluto, Goofy, Mickey and Minnie, and then to some of those more highlighted story moments like Snow White and Dopey, Rapunzel and Flynn, Aladdin and Jasmine. It's absolutely incredible. And the fact that the Main Street Electrical Parade theme plays here, but an original rendition of it, and Whimsy is dancing to it, it's such a beautiful nod to the past, while also standing on its own with a brand new parade float. And what I do love here is kind of, like I mentioned earlier, where you were seeing a highlighted story moment from these movies. It's kind of like a glimpse into a highlight from the films, is that at certain points throughout the parade, again, if you get lucky on the parade route, you'll see those moments come to life. So for example, Rapunzel and Flynn will hold up their glowing lantern, or Aladdin and Jasmine are flying on their magic carpet, and Snow White and Dopey hold up a little gem that Dopey has from the mine. It's just so beautiful, and I really think that the scale of this float is perfect, because at times you have, Goofy and Pluto, and the couple like Rapunzel and Flynn and Snow White and Dopey, like they're on eye level where you can interact with them. But at the end, Mickey and Minnie kind of cap it off in this grand moment. So they are much higher, where you can really kind of tell that they're trying to sell that this is the grand finale moment, as Mickey and Minnie are looking over everybody. But I absolutely love trains, so I just love this float. But when you mix in, nods to the electrical parade, and then you have new music and the lighting and how dynamic the lighting in it is, it's something that you really have to see in person. I'll keep saying it. Go see this parade in person, please. Please, before you judge it. So that's not even all. After the finale float passes, there's a little Disney Starlight logo float, which is very classic Spectro Magic-esque. Feels like something you'd see in the 90s at Walt Disney World. And the fact that there is a nod to Spectro Magic here with Jiminy Cricket, who's waving goodbye to you. Jiminy Cricket said goodbye in Spectro Magic, the previous parade at Magic Kingdom back in the 90s. So they thought, hey, let's bring back Jiminy, but in a way that fits this parade. And Jiminy appears through, again, the magic of Starlight, and was brought to life through Eric Goldberg's hand-drawn animation, legendary Disney animator, and then the team now with Starlight. They brought his animation to life with kind of smoothing out the animation and then making it appear in this blue magical form. So a really, really nice cap to the parade is even after you've seen the main finale float, then you can kind of follow it and watch Jiminy fly around and catch the magic through his umbrella. So again, I absolutely adored this parade, and I noticed that watching it on the 19th compared to when I first watched it on the 18th, I enjoyed it a lot more because I had time to soak in those details, and it wasn't kind of sensory overload watching it the first time. So if you're coming to watch this parade, I would suggest seeing it on 2 nights on your trip, or do what I do. Go watch it in Main Street, bolt over to Frontierland, and then catch it again so you can watch it twice just in one official performance of the parade. But again, my constructive criticism lies is that this parade is so close to being perfect in my opinion. We just need some major improvements to those ground units, whether it's improving the ground units that we have now or adding more performers to the parade itself to add more life to it, because there are moments where it feels like I need to be looking at something, but I'm not. I'm waiting for the next float to arrive, and I think that is a problem that kind of holds it back a little bit, and I think is going to be a common point that we see with a lot of feedback with this parade. But I really hope that Disney accepts that feedback, like, hey, we didn't get everything right, let's make these improvements and let's deliver on the guest experience that people expect so highly of with us. So if I were them, I would make improvements to the units that we see now, like Encanto, Frozen, and Moana, improve those costumes, allow the performers to tell them story themselves because they're so talented, and then add more, add those skeletons or mariachi people around Coco, do something to add more life to it. Also extending the parade's runtime a little bit. It was shorter than I'd hoped. So if you add more performers, maybe add a little bit of spacing, extend the runtime, allow people to soak it in longer, then I think you have a perfect parade here that could run for the next 15 years if they wanted to. So only time will tell, but for now I'm just very grateful to have a nighttime parade back at Walt Disney World. It feels surreal that we have a permanent nighttime parade that's going to be here for the next decade and beyond, especially with how classic it is. It is very, very classic. That's why I'm not comparing it to Paint the Night out of Disneyland, because Paint the Night is more modern, this is classic, and I really love that Disney's leaned into something that honors the previous parades, like the Electrical Parade and Spectro Magic, while also having something with the new current technology that stands on its own, with a mix of the more modern stories like Wish and Coco, and classic things like Peter Pan, the Blue Fairy, and all of the couples and characters that you see throughout the parade. So let me know what you guys think about Disney Starlight and if you'll be experiencing it in person, and I'll see you all in my next video.